Hello, world, fellow geeks and nerds. You have tuned to The Compile, a podcast helping you in your tech journey through art of creative storytelling. I'm your host, Ayan. And if you are following up with open source communities and coding groups, then you must have known that it is the timeline of Google Summer of Code. Google Summer of Code, or Gsoc if you might have known, is a global program focusing on bringing more student developers to open source communities. It's first started in 2005, and by 2009 it has more than 1,000 students around 17 countries, representing 100 plus organizations working on projects that will later be used by different open source groups, communities, and others. By 2018, around 206 organizations joined Gsoc, and big names like Debian, KDE, Open Astronomy, and Sugar Labs were part of it. Talking about these, we have two awesome guests today with us who will be talking about Google Summer of Code more in detail and will help you shape your application so you can crack it in 2019. And today we have two guests with us. We have Prakhars Srivastav, who was a part of Gsoc Open Astronomy in 2018. And we also have Vipul Gupta with us, who was a part of Gsoc 2018 representing Sugar Labs. So welcome guys to the podcast, and I hope you would be having a great time today. So let's start. And Prakhar, would you like to introduce yourself for our guest?
Hey, and thanks for having me. So, hi guys, I'm Prakhar. I am a computer science student at Maharaja Surajmal Institute of Technology, currently studying in fourth year, doing Python, open source, and in my daily workflow. So, that's about me.
Hi, thanks for having me, Ayan. I am Vipul and I'm from MIT University. I have been working with a small community called Alias, and I've been working with open source for about 3 years, and thanks for having me.
So I'm so excited to have both of you guys on our show today because you have also been a part of Google Summer of Code last year, and you guys are helping people around the community to shape their applications and doing mentorship. So welcome to the show, and let's talk about Google Summer of Code. So where did you guys heard it about, and what was your projects all about? So Prakhar, can you share a little bit about your project and what you did last year?
So yeah, my project was basically on Julia programming language. Many of you guys mustn't have heard of it. So Julia programming language initially was proposed as a scientific programming language. Then it got developed into a more general purpose programming language, more like C or Python. Fun fact, Julia is comparable to C in the terms of speed. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, so that is what something people get interested about, right, in Julia. So
C has set a benchmark and everyone is comparing themselves to the C. So that is a good thing to know that Julia is comparative to C.
So Julia is comparable to C, and a bit of my about my project. So my project was with Open Astronomy. The Open Astronomy is basically an umbrella organization. My organization was Julia Astro. So the project was basically to make time scales, to convert different time scales. What are time scales, you may ask? So on Earth, we have different time zones, right? In Russia, we have 11, India, we have 1, so IST is the time zone. So when we go into universe, we don't deal in time zones, we deal in time scales. There are different time scales depending on what amount of gravity is there, depending on how high are you from sea level. So all of these factors are included when you go or when you send a signal to any planetary object or any satellite, right? So you have to account for that difference in time scales. So my project was to build a library which can convert a time scale to a different time scale, which has that kind of, difference optimization, or what you say, which basically accounts for that difference and create a seamless frame for signal transmission. So that was basically my project. And how did I got to know about that? I was just searching, looking for like projects which align both of my interests. So Julia was something I found very interesting by the fact that it is comparable to C. I was studying about Julia, and I was like, I'm always interested in astronomy, so both somehow aligned, and I just sent an application.
Wow, that's quite intriguing. And Vipul, what about you? Like, what project you had during Gsoc time, and how did you heard about it?
So my story started with my mentor, Shyam Saini. telling me about that one should do about GSOC, and if you are contributing to open source, it is a good thing to go forward with. I had my interest with Python. I have a flair for writing documentation for open source organizations, and that landed me with Sugar Labs, which needed someone for a maintenance level task, as in creating an automation system which could help solve or reduce their maintenance problems that they are having. So Sugar Labs is a non-profit educational organization that creates software for third world country students. It's a great organization. It has been as an accredited worldwide. What my project was all about is we created an automation system that could help solve the metadata problems that we're having in activities. So an activity is just like a program. You can have browsers in it, and it runs on the Sugar ecosystem. So the metadata in those activities are never actually auto-updated. You have to either change licenses if someone committed it to it. There are licenses, there are screenshot problems that are having description updates, and one would need, every time a release happens in the activity, one would need to update it simultaneously.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So and that was my automation system all about. We tried with various frameworks, Python, Ansible, and tried to get the best case possible, so that with every release we can simultaneously update the metadata of the activity. What the other part was all about was documentation migration. That was the task I earlier had, and with documentation migration we shifted all the documentation from Wikimedia Foundation that we had to GitHub, so that developers could easily look at it, or users could easily look at it to contribute back to Sugar Labs. So that was the impact. Yeah.
All right, so that was quite interesting to know. And you have been into programming since quite long. I know you guys personally, and I've been following your blogs and a lot of different activities you are doing for open source and in communities around. So can you tell a little bit about your exposure to communities, your exposure to programming, and what skills you were having before you were a GSOCer, or what skills you think are necessary to have before you start your applications and apply for these organizations during Google Summer of Code?
Yeah, so with the open source is something that always pushes you around, right? We all a part of open source.
Definitely, we love open source.
Yeah, some kind of community like that. So I'm very active in PyData Delhi, and basically, so what does an open source do to you? It always pushes you. So when you get to meet a lot of people who are doing stuff in their own vicinity, you find it very intriguing, right? So that's how I got into coding. I was in my first year. I attended a few Delhi meetups, PyData meetups. I saw people doing cool stuff, and like I just wanted to do something. So I just started with web development and algorithm making and whatever I got my hands on got dirty, and just started doing some kind of development process, and that is how I started. So my two piece on how or what how I was and how I got into GSOC was like I was doing random stuff before GSOC. I still am doing random stuff. So it is just how you start with how you approach a particular problem. It's not about how you get into a whole spectrum of problems. It is how you get into a particular problem, how you interact with the people in the open source community, how you approach to a person who's already doing the problem or did a particular solution for it. So yeah, with the amount of exposure that you get from open source, you can definitely get into any kind of open source program like GSOC, right? So I was already into Python coding, a lot of stuff. Then I got into machine learning, so that is another ball game altogether. So I was in Python. Then there was this meetup in PyData Delhi. I was introduced to a guy who just made me do Julia, right? So he pitched me the good parts of Julia, and I was like, okay, I need to experience at least the programming language. So I started doing Julia. I really found it helpful, and that is how I eventually got the GSOC project in Julia, right? So this is something that open source gave me. So it is not a single process, it is a development process. You go to meetup, you meet a lot of people, you try to build a lot of skills. So that is how I stumbled upon many opportunities that comes with open source, interacting with everyone. So a few programming language here and there, a few algorithms that you use, just random stuff.
So be an explorer and keep exploring until something hits you which you think it's good.
Definitely. That is how, I'm sure that is how we all learn, right?
Everybody. So Vipul, you talked about having a mentor in life and recommending things by mentor you tried. So what do you think is the role of a mentor shaping an application during Gsoc? Or let's not talk about Gsoc in general, and let's talk about how mentors can help you grow up, especially if you are in a community where like-minded people are there talking about same stuff and doing things. So how mentorship help you, and how would you recommend having a mentor in your life to go ahead?
So yeah, I consider myself pretty lucky, and all the members of Alias, that we had the mentor as Sham Sani and Anurag Prashar. Both of them
Good guys. I know both of them.
We consider ourselves incredibly lucky to have their access and have their time to get their mentorship pretty early into our life. As in, they always had time to solve our problems or guide us in the right way. They motivated us to take up projects way above our pay grade, I guess. And yeah, we experimented, we explored, just like Prakhar, and what open source gave to us, we consider giving back to them. All of us, the core members of Alias that have been working from day one, are in other organizations or ways that they can contribute back to open source. So mentor really helps, and I can recount a really special experience or incident that happened with Anurag Bhaiya. That what we had in the end of first year, what he said to us was, you should take up a project, and no matter what, if you can do it or not, how much time it takes, you should take it up. And the first project that we took up was about cleaning the rivers with the data management solution that we were having. And what we did was we mapped out the data that was coming in through 12-15 sources into one centralized database, so any scientist can access it, anyone can do it. So, and that project, we learned so much from that project. The mistake that were made in that project is still the laughing matters that we have.
Definitely.
And yeah, a role of a mentor is almost as important as having someone. It's like a friend in life who knows you, who knows how would you like to proceed in life, and would guide you anytime you fall.
So someone recently told me you do a project and you scale it to a level that you have to include image magic in it, and mentor is the one who will introduce you to the image magic. So definitely we all have been coding our ways in our homes, in our college, but having exposure of a real life project is very necessary, especially when you talk about Gsoc, you talk about having a job, working in a team in a collaboratively way. So yes, definitely we'll talk more about that in a bit. So one thing I would like to ask you both is, why do you think student developers should consider sending an application to Gsoc? So I have been meeting different people around the communities. Most of them are students. There are a lot of students out there who get intimidated. They are new to the world of open source and free software. I usually told them, like, don't get intimidated, apply. Even you get failed, doesn't matter, apply again. So here I would like to ask you both, why do you think any student developer who can even write hello world in a programming language should consider applying to Gsoc or similar projects?
So that is it. Like many of my juniors and people in the open source community are like, why should I participate, or how can I participate? I've never been, and Google is so big, open source as a community is so big. I don't even know how to operate Git.
Definitely.
How can I code, and how can I scale my project onto such a level, right? So my single answer to them is, if you're not applying, you're already losing, right?
Right.
If you apply, you get the 50% chance that you can make it, right? So why not do it? Nobody will kill you for applying, right? It's an open source opportunity. So that is something I always say to any student or any developer that I meet. Just do it, because why not, right? So people are always like doubting themselves, like how can I apply? So let me tell you, like in open source projects or programs like Gsoc, they don't necessarily expect you to learn us or to come like knowing everything. You don't have to know every part of Git to be in GSOC, right? So that is some approach that people like me, I always try to go about it. Like don't even care, just like row your boat until you find that push, or you find that stream that takes you there, right? So that is something like I always say to people, like, don't be afraid of anything. If you don't get it, you can always apply next year, right?
And even though if you cannot get selected, you can still contribute. Like, no one is stopping you to contribute
exactly.
to open source.
So it's a good excuse to get into open source. So that is why people organize open source programs or different competition in open source. They are always focused on to get people into open source, right? There is no, and it is always beneficial for you only. Even if you don't make it, if you don't get into the program, you have that badge of honor that you have pulled or pushed into a repo which is used by thousands of people, right? So that is another what do you say, you get out of the open source community. If you get into, if you are able to merge a pull request into a library that is being used, in my case with ESA, that is space or organization, or in his case people like students all over the world. So that is something that you cannot take away from us, right?
Definitely.
So that is the thing that you should always look for. Look to contribute and somehow just make it strong enough that you get selected to GSOC, right?
So that's a big thing. Like you have a badge of honor that your code is being used by thousands of people around the world, and you are changing lives. So again, the same question for you, Vipul. What thing should motivate a student to apply to GSOC or similar kind of programs?
So I totally agree with what Prakhar said about the feeling that you have, and I consider that feeling as good, as your code running on thousands of systems worldwide will make you feel something. And I think that's inspiring. I think students really should go for GSOC. And one thing that I would like to add on a counterpoint is, if it does not work out, it's okay. And most people are like not mad, or even very much intimidated into going to GSOC, like they have to do it or the life would probably fail. And I like to, as in inform my students, as in whatever people who are asking me questions, that if it does not happen, it's okay. There are many, like in my blog also, I wrote the same thing as a Harry Potter reference. Like, if one wand shop does not accept you, there are plenty of other wand shops to go around. One wand will choose you.
Yeah,
right.
And yeah, the same thing goes for me too, as in they expect you not to know everything. With GSOC, there is a very good freedom that you can learn in those 3 months. You can learn before it, you can learn after it. And people are very helpful. Communities are built on collaboration. They want you to learn. They don't expect you to know everything that they have to do. And the stack that they have could be quite intimidating. It could be quite difficult. The learning curve for a new person who going into open source would be very steep. And that shouldn't stop you. That should actually motivate you. Like, so many people are doing great stuff in open source. Why couldn't you? And that's what we try to do in our community as well. So some students do ask me, as in they get motivated through the money aspect of it. And the money aspect.
Yeah, the stipend is really good.
I wouldn't. I wrote the same thing, that it's not to be taken lightly, the stipend or the rewards that come after it.
Yeah, exactly.
GSOC is quite a big program in the world. You get favored for some courses, or even get help. Even gets more help in scholarship programs, or make a connection of networks which help you all lifelong. So yeah, go for GSOC, but do remember one thing, to have the commitment that you give to GSOC to be real, or the results won't be.
Right.
Yeah, right.
So the first thing is you have the mindset that I want to contribute to this code base, not the aftermath like stipend, having preferences in conferences. That comes secondary, and that will come automatically if you are already contributing to open source and not a part of Gsoc, I believe. So that's a good point you made there, Vipul. I also wanted to ask you, like you said, open source projects have admins, open source projects have gatekeeper. They're also humans, and they don't expect you to know everything before you apply to the Gsoc. But skill is there are some certain set of skills which are expected to be you are familiar with before you can apply to Gsoc, or that are some basic skill set that they are expected you to already know, like Git is there, some command and experiences are there. So would you like to throw some light on that, like some basic skills a student should consider learning before applying to Gsoc, or even if they are in first year or second year of college, they have time third and fourth year to apply to Gsoc. So what should they learn between these 2 years so they are Gsoc ready?
So I would like to start this by giving out a fun fact that there is no limitation as to which year you can do it on. People have done it in the first year, people have done it in the fourth year, both in equally okay and successful. So I did it in my second year, and what the first most critical point of skill set that I would like to have in the person who's applying is community guidelines. He should know community guidelines. One that is a very common incident that happens in all the communities is people address others as sir or ma'am, and that shouldn't happen. Even I have people on LinkedIn or Twitter mailing me, so what project should I take on? I know Python, I know R, I know Julia, and there is no specific answer to it. The only thing that you can go for is you should know Git. Git is a critical aspect of open source. It's the version control system that everyone uses. Git, the community guidelines, anything that would go.
Mailing list etiquette.
IRC. How to talk to people.
Yes, exactly.
Do not private message. How to write proper mails. How to work in a community, and how to do collaboration properly. The other point that I would like to mention is how to write. And what I really found advantageous to me that since a community or the organization that you're applying to, Gsoc only sees the paper that you gave them, the proposal. That's your image. That's your entire life on that paper. And if you want to do Gsoc, you have to write that. You have to write it with commitment. Every line should matter. And what I tell my students as well, the people who ask questions, is to weave a story. Every point, starting from the aim to about you, should weave into a story, contributing to a bigger picture that why you are worth, why should people spend time on you. As in, a community that accepts you as a student is actually putting a lot of time, a lot of dedication, a lot of effort into you only, not themselves, that you would be able to do the project and you will help the community after Gsoc. And I think a dedication should be there to a love for Gsoc before applying.
Definitely. So that are some good points you mentioned there, because admins, they are really busy people and they won't expect you to teach mailing list etiquettes. They won't expect you to teach how to message in IRC. So that are some points you should remember.
They'll just spam you.
You don't have to spam. And also like writing a commit message, that itself takes some skills.
There are like in the first commit message that I wrote in Sugar Labs, like I considered myself that I could write one, and the first message that I got was it should be third person, and it shouldn't have any past tense. And there was a complete etiquette for commit messages that the community follows, and I think that's a really impressive factor for it, that the community follows a certain set of rules, guidelines to make a safe and inclusive environment for
because communities are people from all around the world, coming from different backgrounds, culturally and economically. So it is good to have to follow a same set of procedure and rules. And talking about skills, I often see like people spend a lot of time reading Git and installing Linux, going to Gentoo or whatever. We'll talk about that on some later episodes. But if you talk about programs like Gsoc, having experience of writing blocks is equally important. So you don't just have to write code which people are using, you also have to write the documentation, you also have to write blogs about your experiences you are gaining, about your progress. So I don't know personally about you guys. So did you guys started blogging before Gsoc? Or if yes, did it really help you? And what different things you learned while blogging?
So yeah, bit about me that I was blogging before Gsoc, but it was not technical per se. It was a personal blog site. So I maintained a few blog. So I was like blogging just for the fun, right? But when I got into Gsoc, so you need to know Gsoc is not a program that is only inside your organization or whichever code base you are contributing to, not limited to the developers which which the organization has. So Gsoc, the project, the whole project of Gsoc is basically maintained by open source community, which is led by Google itself, right? So whenever you pull a request or you just merge a code, they need to know what you did, but they don't have the time to read the code, right? They don't have the time to see what you did from X line of codes to Y line of codes. So you have to document it in a manner that a layman can basically read and discern what you have done. So blog is important in that sense. So it is not per se for the developers. It is more for the general people in the open source organization at Google itself. So that they can see, okay, you started from suppose X and you reached to a point Y, and what all you did in the month, whatever your time progress for the blog is. So I tracked my blog. It was read by many people, not inside my organization but outside the organization as well. So people are very interested when you get in a project, you do whatever you are doing, and when you try to present it in a nice way. So your code, basically your idea, extends to people who necessarily don't code in the same language or don't have the knowledge of what the code is doing. So that is a very, very big asset that you have. You when you write a blog, the power of code is unleashed, right? So that is why the blogging part is very important, so that you can show what you did. And that is why Google also pushes that you have to write blog for everything you do in a certain amount of time.
I would also like to add here that
before that I would like to tell you, like, I really like your blogs and I've been reading it quite often. So did you also start blogging before Gsoc?
Yeah, I have a blog called Mixter, and what I thought of an idea is, in the first year, my blog started at DigiPlug, and what they had as the program, DigiPlug actually has you to create a blog in your first 2 weeks and work on it, and everyone in DigiPlug reads it. So you have to be grammatically correct, and that's quite important and useful in the future. You have to be on point, you have to be accurate, and you learn how to write, you learn how to express, and that's what I think is somewhere about 50% as important as writing code. Because in the Google London meetup that we went to, Stephen Taylor was mentioning the fact that about 7 to 10 students fail because they couldn't write blogs, or they didn't write blogs on time, they slacked off or something. Google does not compulsorily say that you have to write blogs, but it's always good to explain your code to the people. You have an asset, that you have a microphone to the entire world. And Mixter has been doing great as well. Blogs have been read by many people. Many people comment back to you. They give you suggestions. They give you opportunities to work with them, collaborations, and even access to a world of opportunities with a blog. Think of it as a microphone in which the entire population is in a stadium. Everyone is blindfolded, and you have a microphone. Everyone has a microphone as for that point. And a blog is your way to make your image for others. So regardless of Gsoc as well, many recruiters like to read blogs. Like some people, a very insightful incident is I got accepted into Sugar Labs for a task. Everyone gets a task, right? And my task was to implement a Plymouth image into the Sugar ecosystem, and that happened because the maintainer read my blog, and he was very excited by it. Damn, we could have it. And that became my task. I did it, and I feel really grateful about having a blog before that, because that really opened up the Sugar Labs path for me, and I got interested as well that people are taking interest in me, so I should contribute back to the community. That's what blogging is all about.
Oh, even I started the same way. Like I met a guy from Intel. I was at a Intel hackathon, and he used to be evangelist, IoT evangelist back there. And every project he make, he blogged about it. He make a video about it. So I have been making a lot of different projects out there, but ultimately all went shattered someday. I lost some of them. So he told me like, dude, start a blog and share it with people. So yeah, blogging is really good.
Even if you do blogging, or other thing that you could do is, for every project that you do, write a good readme.
Exactly.
Many. I love a good readme.
Absolutely.
That I try to write, so that any developer that lands on that page just goes to the readme. I go to the readme at first, and if there is no readme, it becomes really tough to read someone else's.
And that doesn't looks like an attractive project at all.
Exactly. That looks like it's like summer holiday project without any readme and stuff. So that looks like the person hasn't put enough heart in it.
Yeah, so make a habit to have a readme or a wiki. So that really helps. And if anything sounds jargon to you during this recording, like DGP Lug, that stands for Durgapur Linux User Group, they have a good program to make you ready for industries or projects like Gsoc. I'll put down these links in the show notes, and do check out our website decompile.in for more. And moving ahead, so Gsoc and similar kind of programs have a lot of competition these days, and people wanted to get in anyhow. So one way I listened recently, like someone is recommending, don't wait for the Gsoc, start contributing before that, 6 months back, 1 year back. So I always used to think that contributing is something that comes from the mindset from the heart, that you use this project, you find it can be better, you find there are some bugs that needs to be fixed, no one is doing that, so you do this because you love that project, you love the community around it, and you want to make it better. So do you really think like contributing to a project before applying for the Gsoc just for the sake of it is a good idea, or it is really something like people should do anyway?
So I have this general expectation from people that like we should start from November, and Gsoc actually starts for students from March, and March and February is the time. And what I explain to students that whenever you start contributing to a project, and it does not really matter that wherever you start, like you can start 6 months back, you can start 14 days before, and they both stand at the same point in the eyes of the community. And that would be my example. I started just 14 days before the submission deadline. When the proposal started submitting, I started writing my proposal then only. Thought like we can do Gsoc with Sugar Labs, and I have been contributing to Sugar Labs for the past month. So that was my story. And some people have been doing it for months. They still couldn't get it. So there is no silver bullet with contributing time or how you approach going into Gsoc. The other thing would be, as in you mentioned another question about how people should apply. What was that?
If they should start contributing before that, that would really help because, maintainers already knew you and they knew your work. They knew how you code. So do you think that really helps in getting into Gsoc?
So one thing I like to add, like the contribution part of the project depends on the extent of project, right? If the project is a basically maintenance one, like the mentor wants you to fix a few bugs in the projects, or maintainer has given a task which you need to basically do before the project submission, that depends a lot. That is how you approach a particular proposal as such. Because if your maintainer or if the organization wants that you have to have 5 contributions, or you have to have a minimum 1 pull request to merge. So there are many organizations which give out a guideline how to apply or how to basically write a proposal. So they mention everything. So my organization had this condition that you have to have a pull request merged before you write a proposal. So luckily I merged 6 pull requests. So that is something I did. But then again, contribution depends a lot upon what is the extent of your program. If there are few projects like Sun Open like OS HF, there's a organization that CERN runs under Gsoc. So that is only for master students, and the project extent is so huge that you cannot even contribute. You can only read and basically project what you have read, but you cannot necessarily start with the project itself. There are some projects in the open source in Gsoc program that needs you to write a complete OS, right? So React OS is one. So how do you start in it? So you basically develop your proposal around the project. You don't go and start contributing or necessarily start going on GitHub and do whatever you can with the code. So it is like how you approach to a proposal depends a lot upon what the project is. Secondly, something I like to say, contribution is not only PRs, right? If you can find new issues and raise it, like maintainers are very happy if they get people who are interested enough that they read their code and found out a few issues. So that is something you can go and please, before getting into Gsoc or any open source program, develop a habit of code reading. People usually code, they go with algorithms and everything. They find something, they develop a project, they move on. But for me, code reading is a necessary part of a developer, right?
Yeah, a good program is something that everyone can read.
Exactly. And code reading habit is something that you're never taught. It's just after doing a lot of projects you get. Let me give you an example. If you're writing a library, in my case, I was writing a library. So I had to read a lot of pre-written code. I had to understand how to basically contribute. So I took about a week to read a code base that was around 1600 lines of code, and it was optimized line of code. So that was not something that you write with enters and everything without formatting and all. So that was clean code. You have to understand with 5 modules everywhere. So you have to link it inside your brain, like, oh, okay, this particular module is imported from here, you are getting. So code reading is one habit that you should develop. Contribution is not necessarily limited to PRs. You should raise a new issue whenever you find it. Just raise it. Talk to your mentors. One thing which no one do is they start talking to mentors very late, or they just post their queries on public channel. But on the public channel, a lot of people are doing the same thing, right? So if your organization is very popular, something with Force Asia, which always ask people to raise individual queries. On Force Asia, you get around 1,000 messages each day when Gsoc is active, right? So one thing is, don't be shy to mail or write your query directly to your mentor. Just be sure that mentor would reply. Some mentors are always busy. They cannot be like, hey, I messaged you, but you are not replying me. It's something bad or something like that. So like he said, you should know the community guidelines, and you can raise individual queries. And that is something how you contribute to your proposal. If a mentor knows that you are interested, you are bold enough to message him inside, in a separate chat, asking about how should I approach, how should I get into this. So all that counts when your application is screened.
So I would like to add another point that in coincidence that the repo that you have between the maintainers or the org admins would really help in getting your Gsoc, because when he reads your proposal, he knows 90% of it.
Definitely.
And he just relates to what the information that you have, the dedication that you have with the project, and that really takes the point home as to why they will select you or not. One more thing is mailing or messaging them. So that's a very thin ice that you have to walk on or see what the community likes or dislikes. One that I found the hard way was people liked private messages that they want, but they were too broad, that people were spamming them as too broad. Like, a message should be about the function that you want to solve rather than how to do GSOC.
Yeah.
And the community is filled, like with Foshicia, with Sugar Labs, we have emails coming in like every day, 7 or 10 of them, with people from IIT, people from grids, that how to do GSOC.
You have to be specific about it. You cannot be generalizing the stuff.
What I would like in a message to read is, I have this problem, I have done this, how do I solve this? And to whom you are addressing, it is a bit of a thin ice that you have to walk on at first, but the good point about it is you should improve. If a person has told you that this should be the right way to do it, do try to follow it. If you learn or grow or you improve yourself, that's a plus point.
And even if you don't get a reply, don't get disheartened. Just understand what should be the mindset of other people who are getting the messages, and tailor it for them.
Yeah, right. And surely, nobody will spoon feed you anything. You need to be very particular about whatever you ask. That is one thing you should
I think patience is key with open source. That if I give a person to reply, the time that I give is 7 days. If the person is too popular or too famous, because he has a lot of emails, he is a human being, and if they don't reply, you send a very gentle reminder and not like, why are you not replying?
Yeah, exactly.
I have mailed you like 2 hours ago.
Definitely. So you write down a proposal, you get selected, and now the GSOC starts. So what were your experience with the GSOC? How did you manage time? Were there anxiety? Were there some instances where you think that you won't be able to meet the deadline and you have to also take care of the blogging simultaneously? So how was your experience?
I would like to add another part of the question is, what was the feelings that go through in the mind when you get selected?
Yeah, definitely. That should
the night the results come out.
That should follow up.
So my experience was, I had an exam on the night of GSOC, and I got several messages. I first saw the dashboard that comes into GSOC and it says confirmed. And I didn't know about that dashboard, as in how it would look after confirmation that you got into GSOC. So I called 2-3 GSOCers and say, how does it look like?
How's your dashboard looks like?
is it am I in or am I not? Because the confirmation mail comes in late. So another thing that happened that I fondly remember is, I came into school, people were congratulating me. I had the dilemma that it's nothing that big. It has happened. GSOC, ho gaya. Type the works. And what I did was I called Shashank in our community, Pideli, and we discussed on the same feeling of feeling not much special. We loved contributing to community. We loved contributing to
maybe because you guys were already contributing to open source.
Yeah, what I liked it, what I wanted as a confirmation that, are you feeling something different? And I wasn't really. Some people have this dilemma as well, that we will do GSOC and they will be the next line stores or big developers that they want to be. But GSOC is just another step. There are many steps that you can take. And that's what the starting is all about. What about you, Prakhar?
So there's a funny story, right? I was I was just checking my phone. So there's another guy who applied with me. He was like, hey man, results are going to be out in another second or something. It's like, okay man, let's see. I was like thinking, oh, maybe I couldn't make it. Maybe something like that. So he was like, results are uploaded. So I was like, he sent me a screenshot of the dashboard. He was like, confirmed or something like that. There was a positive response. So I was like, should I or should I not? Should I open or should I not? I opened. I just went through it. So I got the same confirmation, right? But the confirmation part is so vague because in the sense, because the timer changed into a confirmation part, and you don't get email for another half an hour, right? So for that half an hour, I didn't tell anybody.
True.
I didn't even move. I was lying on my sofa. I was like, okay, let's see what happens. I was waiting for the official mail, and I then started having my dinner, right? And as soon as the mail comes in, my dad was sitting on the sofa. I was like, Dad, I got into GSOC. He was like, what is GSOC?
The same thing happened with me. My family didn't know what was GSOC. I was bouncing around the house. And I got to know, not from a mail, but a tweet
Okay.
Vipul Gupta has got into this.
And many dads would be like, you will be like, Dad, my life will going to change. I will be pushing to a source code that will be used by thousands of people. And Dad will be like, okay, now go get some eggs.
Yeah, so that what happened, right? Yeah. I told my dad that I got into Gsoc. He was like, what is Gsoc? I was like, Dad, Gsoc. Gsoc, it's Gsoc. So that is like, explain it, what it is. So I spent the time like 10 minutes after my acceptance explaining my dad what Gsoc is. So he was like, no, it is too big for you. So he was like, no, Dad, I got it. So
acceptance in story, as in the time that people get in, it's always funny.
Yeah, exactly. Because you don't know what the extent of program is and how many people are in there. Because the Gsoc community, they release the official blog post after a few weeks.
Yeah.
So they pull in all the stats and everything, how many applications were there till the time. So
no one knows. Yeah.
Exactly. So I didn't know how many people were from India selected, and we just found each other on
people post Facebook messages,
LinkedIn, everything. So we all Gsocers as in made a Slack community, and we got to know each other. But the initial few days of the acceptance were, like he said, very, very normal. It was like if I tell to an ex-person that I made it to Gsoc, for me it is like another application that got selected, be it a school, be it internship, be it hackathon application, right? So it was the same feeling, like I made it, but for people like, oh, Gsoc, man.
I have the same story as well. My mother actually Googled what is Gsoc to know what is Gsoc, and I was just right there beside her, and she was reading Gsoc.
So Prakhar, how did your dad react like when you say like your library is now being imported at European Space Organization?
Yeah.
So did you share it like your code has been used by there? So like tell us about something about your library and how it's being used these days.
So what happened is a few days back I was sitting in my office. I just received a mail. My mentor basically, so my mentor released the library version 1 like around 2 weeks back, and he dropped in, there's a complete Julia community mailing thread. So every language has a mailing thread, right? Python has one, your Linux also has one. Yep. Every open source project, ongoing project, you'll find a mailing thread. So I was just going through the mailing thread, and there he mentioned I and Prakhar developed a library, and now we are publishing it to open source. So I was very happy. I told a few people in my office. I didn't tell my dad basically about it. So my dad was like, probably would have responded in the same way. What is a library? Is it something where you can get books from? No. So so it is currently being used by a few organizations dealing with signal transfers and time corrections, which require time corrections. So that is about it. I put in a lot of hours of mine during the whole process. I spent around 10 hours a day, and I coded around 6,000 plus SLOC.
Tell us more about it. Like, how did you manage the time? Was there any instances like where you think that you're going to miss the deadline? You have some anxiety issues or something?
So that is what many people try to do. Like you get into Gsoc. Gsoc is first of all not an internship. True. Gsoc is a participation program where you volunteer. You're not anyone who is interning somewhere. You are just participating and volunteering in the whole process, right? So they basically don't encourage you, but they don't stop you to join another internship, right? So people, they are always wanting to do more and something like that. So one thing I want to mention is Gsoc is very extensive on your full timetable or whatever you're following. So because even if you plan everything, you'll be like, I'll give 4 hours, 5 hours to this, but you don't know what the development comes in with, right? So when you write a code, you have to fix bugs you're fixing bug A, but then bug B occurs, then you fix bug B, bug C occurs, the whole cycle, right? So when you're developing a big project, so you don't know how much time you are going to put in, right? So around after the first month of initial onboarding and everything, I started writing code. I was like, this is a normal code base, I can write it 4 hours, 5 hours a day. But as soon as you get into the last week of assessment, and you see like now the mentor is asking for the documentations, then he asks you to document the code itself, like you have to put the comments and everything. Then it gets very, very tedious. Then you get all the anxieties. Then you have to work late night writing the documentation for the code you have written a month ago. So you have to read the code again. You have to visit the library again.
How you fix the old bugs.
Exactly. And you have to write everything. Then at the last moment, you have to create a readable blog which will be published to your website. So it seems very easy as in when you get into the Gsoc part, but yes, it is very heavy on your time scale, and you do need to manage how you put in your hours. That is very essential. What about you, Vipul? Is it the same?
I would like to mention the same thing as well, because the part about accepting into Gsoc before the application, in the application process, you have to work a lot as well. I put in about 6 hours a day to read the code, learn about the documentation, learn about the community of Sugar Apps, then write the proposal, make the proposal that would seem much more effective to the maintainers. And that's the part that you have to give the commitment, the blind commitment that you have to give to Gsoc. Because
so when you were writing a proposal for Gsoc, there is a section where you have to explain week wise, like I would be doing this in week 1, this in week 0. So how far were you able to kept with that commitment, and how did you manage the time? Was there any strategy you made to manage the time, and were you able to live up to that?
So proposals are really, as I said, the proposals are really critical to your selection or rejection. So, and one part that people often forget about is creating that deadline table that you have, that what will you in week 0, week 1, week 2.
Exactly.
And what I really thought about is I would start from community bonding, and the community bonding period is, the members of the community, but I already knew everyone. So I actually tried implementing other ways that I thought I could solve the problem too. And that's how while writing the proposal, I think that's a very good skill that you can learn from Gsoc proposals is you have to see forward in the future about 12 weeks in front, what you will do in week 13. And that's a very tough task, because like Prakhar said, that in the starting you would think that this is a normal code base, you can do it in 2-3 weeks easily, and it does not happen.
So were there any instances where a bug was stuck for quite long and you were like, I won't be able to make it?
Oh, so there's a very
high chance of it.
A very high chance of it. And I actually got stuck in a bug because my job was not only to create a library, but to create it at such a level that it can be directly imported into a already working environment, right? So it has to be optimized first of all, because you're dealing with a lot of transmissions and everything. You have to be optimized to a stage where you can compare to the C library or any particular library that exists, right? That is how you make yourself useful. So optimization was the number one thing on board. Like if you create a function, you have to optimize it, then you have to document it. So that is how the whole process works. So I coded a function, had 4 for loops, and you get the complexity, right? So how long it would take to run. So my mentor was like, no, you cannot do it. And I had absolutely no clue how to approach it any another way. So I tried the recursive algorithms, everything. And after doing a lot of stuff, after asking my mentor how to approach it, and guys, the mentor will never tell you what the solution is. Mentor will
They want you to solve it yourself.
Yeah, I asked him like, how can I approach it? He was like, Google it, find your own way. I don't have the time to tell you, but
put it on Stack Overflow.
He's actually not trying to spoon feed me, because he wants me to learn, right? So I was like stuck on that bug for about 3 days. Then I eventually solved it, breaking the four inside for loops into two different for loops, which made my code run from microseconds to nanoseconds. And that is how I approached it. And a random community member came in and he was like, you can do it like this. And I was like, thank you.
That's the beauty of community.
Exactly, that is the beauty of open source.
I also would like to add here that the part that you have to code is quite less compared to the part that you have to fix bugs,
Yes.
answer messages, take calls, get to meetings, prepare for those meetings, and then also make reports of those meetings. So between bug A and bug B, you have to answer about 100 commit messages and think about answering them, because in a community of thousands, you cannot just say anything you wish.
Right.
That I think this is the right way and you are wrong. And
Absolutely.
This is not the way you behave in a community. One. Two is you have to be very considerate on anything you speak, because that takes a long time impact. As in, once your reputation, as in the impression goes wrong, it stays wrong. And the time that I put in was in trying out ways and implementations of various functions that the system did was about 2-3 hours. And then I discussed with mentors with entire days in play that, and my mentors were quite good. They were on WhatsApp. And we discussed for hours and hours how to do this process easily. And we used GitHub API a lot. And GitHub API, the problem with GitHub API is it's the massive bottleneck. They will just send data slow. So you have to make your program fast. As in, we tried multi-threading, we tried different languages. We also tried having, we thought about buying the development part of the API so that we can get data out faster. And yeah, that's about it. You have to work a lot. You have to put in the commitment. And that's what I wrote as well, as in Gsoc is resource intensive. If you do not give that much time, if you think that you could do an internship, you can. No one will stop you. But it will only increase chances that you will lack out.
So while we are talking about fixing bugs and integrating different APIs, optimizing the code, and Gsoc is for students, right? So students are not in a habit to make production ready code. They are not in a habit to optimize everything. So one important thing they forget while working for a big code base is test. So what do you think is important of test, and were you writing your own p-test before Gsoc, or you learned it during the Gsoc, and how would you recommend the ability to write tests and use your own test along with the code bases?
So my my whole library was built across different functions, and for any library or for any program to go in production, testing is important. Guys, you cannot escape testing. If you are a good programmer, you don't get away with testing. So my mentor was like always TDD, like test development approach. So I had to write UTs for everything. Every if else statement, we used coveralls. Guys, if you want to know about it, just go on and search about coveralls. Coveralls is basically a package that checks on the fly when you commit how many test cases are covering all the code coverage basically. So coveralls is a good program for that. So my coverall limit was 95 plus, or the PR is not acceptable.
Oh.
So I had to code every UT for every if else case. Even if my code was breaking or had some if else and I knew about it, I had to write a test for it, and I have to introduce a test case. So I have to study. So this is something that you should already be implementing in your daily workflow. Write a small test for everything, integration or unit test, whatever you feel like. Small test basically doesn't hurt your code. It only it reinforces whatever you have written, right? So UTs are very important, and then you have to write doc tests, and then you have to write different kind of testing. So yeah, 50%, not 50, I would say 40% of my time was spent into how good my coverage was. So yeah, that part is very necessary. What about
So Vipul, you mentioned having a mentor and participating in communities, and I know both of you guys are very active in local communities around Delhi NCR. Prakhar comes up to a lot of Pi data meetups, and Vipul, you are active in Pi Delhi. You also run Alias, and ILACD, you are very active. So what do you think was the role of community in embracing your application, embracing you as a developer, and how a community helped you be a better programmer? Maybe like you were coming up with your Gsoc project bugs and putting up forward with the people who are helping it. So how would you recommend people to join communities and how it helped you?
So I would really recommend joining a community first. And communities are really a good place for your personal development. And even if you do not know anything, you get to learn a lot of new things, and your horizons increase. You know a lot of things. You have little information about approximate information about everything, and that's what helped me in communities. As in, I knew a lot of frameworks. I know what I liked, and that really helped. The second point was as working as a lead with PyDelhi. What you had is you became the face of community, and everything that you speak, everything that you do is criticized or even helped with to improve. And that really helps because you know how to speak, how to behave in a community, you know how to address other people, and everything that goes into plus points. With regards to technical, you know how to work in an open source environment, know how to collaborate both online and offline. And that really helps because when like people started not started fighting, but people have small arguments about commits and pull requests, and I have seen it happening that it becomes really ugly, that people sometimes criticize about code and they do not take it the right way. And that's what communities teach you: to be humble, to be polite everywhere. Everyone is giving their own time. No one is free for you, and you learn it either the hard way or doing it again and again. And I am really I think appreciating the way communities work here in New Delhi and in all over India, that teaches people really just that helps them become a great open source programmer. And do join communities: Pi Delhi, ILACD, Linux Chicks. If you are a women developer, Pi Data Delhi. There are many communities. We have GDGs and
even if you are from a small town in India and living in a suburb who don't have much meetup groups, then there are some online groups like DGP Log is there. A lot of Flags groups are there. You can join them and
you can start your own, and people will help you.
Definitely.
So another thing that I would like to mention is people always ask, how do you get to know what opportunities are there?
Yeah.
And another very crucial part is how to start, right? How to start X is a very, very common and very important question that everybody asks, right? And all of these can be answered by communities and community members. So whatever you go over, whatever programs that exist, people in the community get to know it first, because those are the people who always stay in touch with these kind of programs, right? Secondly, how to start X. How to start X is an important question, and believe me, if you are in the right community and asking the right question, you will be answered soon enough. And I can stress on the fact that you will get a good mentor also in a good community.
And even if you want to start your own open source projects and looking for contributors, I think community is the first place you should look for.
Exactly. One more thing that I would like to add is communities actually give you a portal to a lot of opportunities as well. Like Gsoc is one, but there are many others that you can go for, and a community will help you decide. Like some ways that I want career advice, and you don't have, like, you can ask your seniors. That could be the limit that you could have. In a community, you have unlimited potential. You have entrepreneurs, you have people who have been working in the field for 20 plus years, and they are willing to help you, because at that time, at the meetup, they have dedicated that time for the help, for coming to the community to chill or to help other people. And that's what the good part of the community is.
Definitely.
So other than your code being used by millions of people doing different kinds of things that you have also never imagined, and the stipend, what other post-completion benefits you guys think Gsoc provided you? So I know like Vipul has been doing talks about even his Gsoc project, Plymouth. I guess you took a talk a few months back, and the Sugar Labs, the community which which you had Gsoc with, you are now representing that community around the conferences around the world. So yes, stipend is definitely there. A good stipend makes your pocket heavy. Other than that, what different benefits you think you received out of being a Gsocer?
So I would like to first mention the stipend aspect, because that some people think that is the critical. I do not disagree. But what a stipend is all about with Gsoc is they had it for the reason that if you're working in a full code base and you need a support, Google wants you to have it so that you do not work for free. No one should work for free. And that's what the aim for Google has. Google had for Gsoc, and that's what the stipend is all about. And what helped me in after Gsoc with Gsoc is that it opened a world of opportunities for me in terms of conferences, attending hackathons, mentoring other people, get a chance to get mentored by so many great people and meeting many great individuals around the world. So one would be, the people that I admire, I usually do a small session or a peer-to-peer session with them. As in, I take 5 minutes of their time and ask them questions that I find really great. So one I did for Stephanie Taylor, who is the program manager for Gsoc, and she told me about how she manages Gsoc on a worldwide scale. And what really amazed me that the open source team, is just made of 5 people. And 5 people doing a program this big, 13,000 students in total, participating, applying, if they got their t-shirts on time, if they got their stipends on time, organizing all that takes a bit of dedication, commitment, and you get a chance to experience that in other people's lives. You learn from them. And with Gsoc, I got the opportunity to speak at Google London as well, in their meetups, as in tell about my story, about the project that we are doing at Sugar Labs. With Sugar Labs, we started a new outreach program. As the outreach manager, we are going through many countries with workshops, talks. Other Gsocers can have workshop materials. We have introduced a bootcamp kit that they can have in their own country to promote Sugar Labs in the entire world and grow our community as one. So PyCon US is one. We have applied in many other conferences so that people can have an opportunity to speak as well. Speaking is a really good form of growing your portfolio and growing your connections, because if your words impact the person sitting next to you, he will surely help you. And I think that's a great way to, which Gsoc helped me personally and has empowered me to help the community.
So definitely you entered a different man before the Gsoc, and you came out to be an entire new person, both in terms of a developer and in as a blogger, and entire different person altogether. So Prakhar, what did you experience personally after being a Gsocer?
So one thing Gsoc does to you is it puts you on the map. So before Gsoc, you are just a developer. After Gsoc, you have contributed actually to an open source program. So that comes with the whole shebang. You get to meet of.
When you go to the concert, you're like, hey, you are the fellow Gsocer, we share the same organization.
Exactly. So when you go to international meetups, like I went to PyCon France and Poland, I got to meet a lot of Gsocers there. So you share a natural bond which you never tried to make, right?
Definitely.
So you are in there, you're talking about, hey, what did you do, and something like that. And if you pitch yourself as a Gsoc student, so they know you actually did something as in you are endorsed by Gsoc organization that you can code on large code basis. So another thing that comes with Gsoc is you get a referral to Google, which is very important. You get a 5-year referral link to Google that you can use whenever you want to apply to Google. And basically that is a referral from Gsoc or like open source community, Google open source community, that they have vetted you and they feel like you are good enough to carry out any development process inside Google or outside any, like they attest you. So that is something that you get as a reward after completing your stint with Gsoc. And another thing is the recognition. Definitely the recognition that you get from the local community, from international community, the kind of opportunities that Vipul was already mentioning, that like you get a solid boost to your profile as soon as you write Gsoc on your CV. There's a solid boost to your portfolio that yes, you have done something. Another thing, writing blogs and the whole process makes like markets you, in the sense that yes, you have done this bigger project and you have committed this much of hours, you have a lot of code base or a lot of blogs ready to, so that essentially you make out of the program, which I am definitely sure I would not ever do, or would have been able to done if I didn't join.
I would also like that point about feeling a part of a bigger self in a community. And I recently interviewed with Red Hat as an internship opportunity that was happening.
That's so amazing.
And what happened was the person who was taking the interview said that, were you a Gsocer? I said yes, and I was in Sugar Labs too, and that's where we bonded. And it really helps you if people that are in the same community meets you, get to know about you, they already have a bond with you, that we are in the same community. So it makes the small talk a bit more personal, and you get a lot of opportunities as well. Yep.
So Prakhar, Vipul, we have always been taking one question known as question of the day from our people who follow us on social media, and this one is coming from Prachi Nair, and she's asking, is there any other program similar to Gsoc? Gsoc seems quite big and intimidating at first. I want to be a part of small programs before I apply to Gsoc. So I know outreach is there, Gsoc is there. Is there anything else you would like to mention here?
Another programs, like small programs. First of all, Prachi, I believe, Prachi, right?
Prachi.
So Prachi, first of all, as I started with this podcast, I would like to stress on the point, no program is big. Gsoc doesn't expect you to be full-fledged developer to be a part of. Just go out and just explore the like whole community. Apart from that, if you are thinking that you want to join some small programs first, or programs at low scales first, so that you are better prepared for Gsoc. So there is a community called Girl Script Summer of Code. So I was a mentor for that. So what it does is it takes a lot of people, local communities, and they in the Gsoc fashion, they appoint a lot of mentors, they appoint a lot of volunteers who want to participate, and they just assign each mentor a volunteer, so that and a project. So a mentor can guide a volunteer on a particular project. So that is essentially how Gsoc works, and you get a quite good feel out of GSSS SOC, and you can search for that online. Apart from our Gsoc outreach, every community hosts a small sprint. A sprint is somewhere where you can learn about the community and how to commit or contribute your code, basically. So I would suggest you go PyDaily or rolls a lot of sprints. PyData Daily also rolls a lot of sprints. You get hackathon sprints where you can contribute directly to a code base. Then big libraries like in Python you get pandas and matplot. They host a online world sprint. So
bug days.
What?
Bug
days. Then you have document sprints. These sprints are very important, and you can find all of it
even if you're not a developer, you can participate in packaging sprint is there.
Packaging sprint is there, documentation, as I've told. These are not code intensive programs. So you can find it about Twitter or join any mailing list. Mailing lists are very important if you are not on any communication platform per se, like Telegram or Slack or IRC, any IRC. I would still suggest, if you are following a mailing list. Mailing list basically gets a lot of information in a very small format, like a mail. So you get minimal, yes, exactly. So you get a lot of information in a single condensed mail, and that is good to go. What about you?
So I would like to break this question into two parts. One is finding opportunities, and that could be done through many kind of portals, and other could be non-technical as well. If Prachi, you want to go into non-technical as well, so what we discussed about in the Google London meetup and the Mentor Summit that happened for Codin, that Google is going to start a new program called Google Summer of Writing, and in which they will start professional writers can go into technical documentations for open source organizations. But don't take my word for it until and unless it comes out. Stephanie and the open source team is quite excited for it because they need writers. They need pretty good people that can write quality documentation. One is this. Second would be like you said, Girl Script has been growing a lot with their Summer of Code program. They're quite good. Anuba is doing good work there. One another would be as in I work with a lot of outreach programs. So other that I know about is Kharagpur Winter of Code.
Yeah,
Kharagpur Winter of Code has been running for quite a long time. They do it in a very condensed manner. They're doing quite a lot of quality work there. And Kharagpur Winter of Code, you can get into Hacktoberfest. Hacktoberfest is pretty good if you want to just take the first step into open source. You get rewarded for it as well. Search about it on Google, Hacktoberfest, and others could be developer sprints are really well. So PyDelhi, or if you are not from Delhi, you can get into the developer sprints, or as they happen with PyCon India as well. Or you can contact the mentors who are part of developer sprints to help you out. That could be a good line of progress, as in how you get into a community. For programs like Gsoc, Outreach G or Gsoc is one. Other people are coming up with good programs as well that are in the summers. So ERP Next has a program.
Yeah.
ERP Next Summer of Code is one, and that's about it. A good string for Google would be Summer of Code, and you will get a lot of programs through it.
Yeah, just
Summer of Code program.
Search on Twitter #open source. You'll find a lot of
one more
source
program that I would like to consider, as in since women developers have been doing a lot of good work. I have been part of a great community called 1 Million Women to Tech, and they have really well made program. I am truly inspired by the scale they have it. 1 Million Women to Tech is the best program if you're a Python developer or a JavaScript developer, and they teach about just about everything. Yeah.
So you start from zero and get to know a lot of stuff.
I really liked 1 Million Women to Tech because many.
That's a good name altogether.
Yeah, and they have their goal as well. They want to get 1 million women to tech, and they have been working quite hard for it. They have a summer program as well as a winter program.
Winter program, yes.
So thank you very much, Prakhar and Vipul, to stay with us today and share your experiences and helping our listener to frame their application for Gsoc 2019. And thank you everybody who tuned in for this episode. Hope you had an amazing time and learned new things. These two young programmers, developers, and my friends shared a lot of things with their experiences. Lastly, before signing out, I would like to thank our venue partner 91 Springboards, who have extended a huge helping hand in recording this and making this production possible. As always, do log into our website decompile.in, where you'll be finding links to this show notes, all the links we mentioned in the episode, also blogs and website to this amazing developer who were our guest today. And follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.